Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for joining us another Sunday in our third season, first few weeks into our third season. Man, we've just had some incredible conversations so far. Looking forward to what we're going to produce in this 2024 as Fathers Incorporated celebrates its 20th anniversary. 20 years, y'all. Can you believe that? November 14th is the actual anniversary date to which we'll be hosting a gala here in Atlanta, Georgia. You'll hear more about that throughout the year. It has been my honor over the last 2 years with the people that I've spoken to, the people that I've met, the conversations that I've had around this conversation of fatherhood and all things related to that. And I'm just excited about what's in front of us for the rest of this year in terms of really expanding, building on this conversation so that the I Am Dad podcast can create a repository of voices so that when people want to hear what folks who have been in this field have done and why they've been inspired to do this work, that they can come here and hear those voices. Today is no different. I am often honored by bringing people who have been close to me in very many ways, even family-like, and to be honest with you, closer than, brothers, and have been brothers and are brothers to me, like this person today. You all know him and maybe you don't. And as like when they introduce the new couple, when they say, we're going to present to some and introduce to others or something like that. Mr. Shawn Dove has been a friend of mine since the entirety almost of me doing this work back in New York City. He has a formal bio, which I'm going to read, but you can also look at it on our website if you want to know about or know more about what he does. But I'm going to read just the first paragraph because I believe that is relevant to our conversation. Shawn Dove's leadership mission mantra is there is no cavalry coming to save the day in our communities. We are the iconic leaders that have been waiting for. And we are also the curators of the change we are seeking to see. I think it is 100 Black Men has the motto, be what you see, or you are what you see, something like that. It's similar to that. But he has almost 4 decades of cross-sector leadership in the fields of youth development, community building, philanthropy, arts, education, leadership development, and media literacy. He is also the founder of the Corporation for Black Male Achievement, a consultant and publishing firm that produces community building engagements and leadership development engagements that elevate stories of loving, learning, and leading by and for Black men and boys. It is always a pleasure to have this brother in my space, and it is no different today. Shawn, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, good brother General, as I have given you that title long ago, but grateful on this January 6th, 2024. And we know that date has some significance. And I remember 3 years ago, it was you who sent me a text and said, "Do you see what's happening on CNN?" And I was like, what's he talking about? And turning on and seeing an insurrection in action. So that date. And then 2 years ago on this date, today's the birthday of I Too Am America, Loving and Leading Black Men and Boys, which dropped on January 6th, 2022. So it's 2 years. And I'm just excited for this conversation, knowing that every time we come together, God just sets off some sparks, man. Sets off some sparks. And as you know, we had to kind of cut our pre-conversation in the green room and say, "Hold on, man, I saved some of this for the podcast." But just let me just say this, brother, man. I just want to say that I love you, and you have just been an inspiration, a support, a brother, a confidant for the last 18 years, and prolific. Prolific. I remember, so a couple things, and I'm
No,
going to
this
be
your
quiet, right? I
podcast.
don't
You
want
ain't gonna
to
be listening
start
to
off.
you,
Let's
not
go
me.
30 minutes. Let's go 30 minutes, right? So when we met, and it's kind of like, you know, you have people in your life. I don't remember the exact day or whatever you might, but I remember the season where a God intersected our journeys, right? I think I had just launched Proud Papa, my news magazine for African American fathers, and you had already launched Fathers Incorporated, and it was just like almost like an Elizabeth moment, right? I had this dream, you were building your dream, and two things. I remember you telling me the Genesis story of Fathers Incorporated and being in Albany. And I don't know if you were in your basement or where you were in your home and just going through this crucible moment and getting out a journal and writing the vision and making it plain. I remember that, and that's 20 years ago. And I also remember, maybe this was a dozen years ago or 10 years ago, this power in declarations, and you sharing with me that I am, right? We were talking about those I am statements, right? You said, I am going to be the leading advocate for responsible fatherhood in the nation. You did it. You're doing it, right? And so speaking that vision, right? So I just wanted to say, inspired to know you, brother, and you're manifesting one of my mission mantras with your podcast of that we have to become masters of our own media. We have to tell our own stories, right? And so
Absolutely.
grateful
Thank you
to
so
be
much for
here.
that because, you know, I've often, you know, it's crazy because we grind at this work and we do this work. And I've often felt, you know, some kind of way, or can't even describe what it was, but I've always thought that we should always have been working closer together, right? In terms of closer. And I was going through this thought one time, Sean. I don't think I've ever mentioned this to you. I was having this thought that something had happened, and it might have been, and we'll talk about this around my brother's keeper. And I was like, oh my goodness. Oh, I know what it was. It was when you had the opportunity to talk to President Barack Obama, which was like, I'm sitting there watching that. And I'm like, why am I not at that table? Like, we should be having this conversation. And
Mhm.
as soon as I said that, God said to me, it's okay for people to be on the highway going in the same direction, but it's not necessary that you're
Mm,
in the same lane. And I was like,
mm, mm,
whoa. And I disconnected from it. I'm like, go, brother, go. Like, hit your lane and hit
mm,
that thing hard because I'm going to stay in mine and I'm going to hit mine hard. And I think that there's some place down in this road where there is a rest stop for us to pull into and to have these conversations
mhm.
about where we are to cultivate the generation of people that will take over the rest of the highway as we go off the exit ramp, whatever that's going to look like for us,
Wow.
right? And
Mhm.
so, and to get
Yeah.
our brothers
Yeah.
and sisters to
Wow.
understand that concept, that if we look at it from a highway perspective, we can get to where we're trying to get faster than if we look at it from a lane perspective. right? And it'll set your
Mm,
narrative with
yeah.
respect to how you can complement the rest of the highway and everybody get to where they're going without having dialogue and conversation and frames of thought that make you have a limited lane mentality.
Mm. That's so powerful. And I think to amplify that metaphor is, I think the challenge is, how do we share our
Mm.
strategic direction? How do we share what's the North
Mhm.
Star, the true North, right? And because we can be on the same lane or the same highway, but if we're all going in different directions, we're turning right. And so, how do we share with one another our collective true north, right? And I think one of the challenges and shortcomings, and I don't think it's just with the Black male achievement and responsible fatherhood movement. I think it's related to a lot of our community building and civil rights and human rights leadership is like coming together and sharing uh,
Mm.
where we're going and what
Mhm.
our particular lanes are. Um, I would say this also for you, you have been really disciplined and focused
Mm.
in your lane, right? Fathers Incorporated
Mm.
a lane, right? Um, I've been switching lanes, and uh, stopping and breaking down and let me go into the shop. And I think one of the things that is important for us to know, particularly as Black men, is that
Mm.
comparison
Mhm.
is all in killing,
Yeah.
right? And part of our masculinity is being competitive. And I'm a
Right.
former ball player, right? I can see, I can't even, you be sizing people up, right? They come into the park, you sizing them up,
Man.
how they walk, what they're wearing, and it's like, how do we go from I got next to we got next, on the court, right? So I identify with what you're sharing, right, with me in that like Obama moment. And I think the beauty is just like having this conversation and being able to say, you know what? My therapist tells me all the time, right?
Mm.
You're human. Allow yourself to have these
Mhm.
human
Mhm.
feelings, right? Uh, we talk about envy a lot, right? Me dimming my light so I don't
Yeah.
feel or
Mhm.
make other
Mhm.
people feel envious, right? And then she said, "Well, what about the times you're feeling envious, Shawn?" And I so, um, looking out the window is real easy, but looking
Say,
in the
why you want to
mirror,
bring up old stuff?
oh yeah. So yeah, so um, and and I know if it's not public, it may not be public yet, but you shared something with me in the green room,
Uh-huh.
a declaration, right? And I knew what you shared, big vision,
Hmm.
it's gonna happen. Why is it gonna happen? Because I've watched Kenny Braswell over the
Mhm.
years make these declarations, and it has
Yeah.
it's happened.
So thank you, man. I
Um,
appreciate it. I mean, I
yeah.
appreciate everything. I mean, listen, you stood next to me, brother, in one of the most influential, important aspects of my life, and that was when I got married, right? And so I didn't think that at my age that would ever happen again. Found my true bride. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be halfway near where I am today, right? She has just kind of been exactly what I needed to stabilize myself in a way to be able to stay focused, right? She's a motivator, she's a supporter, she's my alpha dog in protection of me, right? And so I never have to kind of worry about anybody crossing the fence because they got to get to me, you got to get through her, Right. And so I want to take a step back though,
Mhm.
Sean, because it's another experience that we shared together. And I just want to kind of bring this up because it's a question that I ask in the beginning of all of my podcasts and I skipped right over it. Felt like we're having like a Cat Williams moment, right? Where we just coming in hard. Like we're not even setting people up.
Who's cat in this scenario here? Let's get it.
So what's your daddy story, bro? Tell people what's your daddy story.
Wow, that my daddy's story, right? So, my daddy's story is that fatherhood and being a dad has been the most rewarding and challenging um, journey and story that is continuing that I've had in my life. But my daddy's story starts that I never woke up one day to say good morning, Dad. Right, my mother and father were not married, and did not grow up with my dad. So I had some interactions with him because his parents, my grandparents on his side, they loved me unconditionally, and I spent a lot of time with them in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and I had so many. My mother just like utilized community, and I had so many father figures in my life, and coaches and mentors. But I would say a seminal moment for me, right? My daddy's story is that I am, Nia, Maya, Cameron, and Caleb's dad, my adulting children now. But early on in my fatherhood journey, I remember one night, it was a storm, and my twin boys, Cameron and Caleb, they were around 3 years old. And Cameron started calling my name around 2 o'clock in the morning because of the thunderstorm. And I was like, God, why is he calling his mom at 2 o'clock in the morning? He's calling his father. And I got up in the middle of the night, went into his room, and his twin brother was sleeping through the storm. That's his personality, right? He slept through the delivery. We had to go in and pull him out of the delivery. But his twin, but Cameron, and I just like ushered him to sleep, prayed him back to sleep, and he went back to sleep. And I went back to my bed and I laid down and I just had this moment. And I was like, wow, what is it like to call your father in the middle of the night and he comes to you? And I said, Shawn, you may not have ever experienced that moment, but you are going to break that cycle and you are going to be there for your children, right? So that is part of my daddy's story. My daddy's story is evolving. I think I recently shared with you with my adult children, and talking about comparison is a calling killer, right? And social comparison, and the last few years have been a real challenge in my parenting and fatherhood journey. But just this year, I said, you know what, Shawn, stop like wanting your children to do something for you to brag about, right? Everybody's on their own journey. Stop doing this social media comparison and just be the father and the dad that they can brag about. And that just like eased so much of like my image and ego and all of that as a father, right? And so the daddy journey continues for me, and being a father fixture, right, is and has been uh, just as important as being a father figure, right? And I've been that for so many young people over my life, but being a father fixture, and we could tell more. I'll share more about Proud Papa, which you are familiar with, the newspaper I started, and there was so much about being able to say and get vulnerable and say, I ain't got no blueprint for this fatherhood journey. I'm stumbling through the dark. And being vulnerable enough as a man, a black man, to come to a brother like you, help create a community and say, I need help, right? And having other brothers share like, oh, I've experienced that, oh, I need help too, right? And so I'll close the long answer with saying so much of my daddy's story is that the more that Shawn works on Shawn in my like therapeutic journey, right? The more whole and loving and giving and self-aware and understanding dad I could be. Right. I can tell you some stories of Daddy of the Year, right? I can tell you some stories of like you need to go to the end of the line, right?
You say some T.I. King detention, moments.
One quick story. I'm sorry. So I remember this has to do with my sons in elementary school. So I would drop kids off to school before going to the train station and taking New Jersey Transit into the city. And rushing, it was always chaos, gotta make the train, let's go, come on, let's go, rah, rah, rah. And that morning, my son said, oh, today is a pajama day for school. We're supposed to wear pajamas. I was like, hold up, you're telling me this as we're leaving the door? I was like, pajama day? There's no pajama day at PS 144 on 122nd Street and Lenox Avenue. What kind of suburban nonsense is this pajama day, right? And I was like, look, it ain't happening. Get your butts in the car. We're dropping off. And they crying. It's pajama day. There ain't no pajamas. And I dropped them off. And I sped off to catch the train. But I had this convicted moment, like, come on, Shawn. And I went to the Kmart, right? This was Kmart was still around. And I bought pajamas, knew that I was going to miss my train. And I showed up at the school with the pajamas and just allowed myself to like say, hold up, slow down. It might not have been a pajama day for you, but it's a pajama day for them. And so what, they didn't tell you the night before and all of that. And so I have a bunch of moments, right? And so in the same day, same story, I'm like, mean daddy, like the hell with pajama day, but then having a vulnerable moment, an understandable moment, and saying, you know what, it's not about you getting to this train on time and making this meeting. It's about you being present as a dad. And I was like, when I came in, I was like the hero of the school, like, with the pajamas. And I have a bunch of stories like that.
When I first started working with the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, we had a messaging campaign that was don't miss a minute because you might miss a moment. And we have since gone from that, but I often use that when I'm speaking to dads about exactly what you're talking about, which is the minute matters. The minute matters because that's where the moment happened. And it's important to respect and recognize moments for our children because you never know what moment they're going to remember. It's a crapshoot, right? The very thing you think they're going to not think about when they're 25 is the thing that they're going to think about, right? And it's that particular moment, and that moment in and of itself can serve as a wedge between you and your child. And so, and it is about what you describe with respect to slowing down. Like when I use that highway analogy, I always talk about the most frustrating thing on the highway. And that can be different from most people. But for me, the most frustrating thing on the highway is the person in the fast lane going slow, right? And you get up behind them, you cruising, and it's like, don't they know they in the back? this ain't, this ain't the,
Road rage is
this ain't the
real.
slow lane. Get out the slow lane. Move over. Get to the side. Blah blah blah. You trying to find a way to fly around them, but you never know why people are moving at the pace that they're moving, because some people are moment people.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be in their car with their children having a intimate conversational moment that says to the driver, I don't want to get to the destination as fast as I usually get there because I want to savor this moment right now. And I'm not really paying attention to the people who are behind me losing their minds, because it's not about you, right? They're not going to remember me
Mm-hmm.
seeing you in my rearview mirror. They're only going to remember this conversation that we had because daddy's sharing a moment with me that we never thought they was going to share with them, right? And so that's kind of when when you was telling that story, that's one of those kind of the highway. I have this whole highway thing. I've never done it publicly, but it has served to be a mechanism for those times in my life, and more specifically with my children, um, to slow down.
Listen, man. Thank you for bringing that up. You're reminding me. So speaking of highways, God, this is maybe 2010. Took a road trip with my sons to DC. It was Father's Day, and brother Joshua Dubois invited me to a fatherhood event in Southeast DC where Barack Obama was the keynote speaker. And drove down with my sons, stayed like in a hotel the night before. They were excited because there was video games in the hotel. And we were blessed to be in the gallery behind on stage, right? And there was a whole lot of a lot of speakers ahead of time, right? And took a long time for the president to come up and speak. And by the time he finally came up to speak, both of my sons fell asleep. And here I am thinking about I'm on the CNN with my sons, and they done fell asleep. You know, the headline, President Barack Obama bores black boys sleep. And I'm worried about all of that, right? And I was like, God, I can't, how hard can I nudge them on camera to wait, to wake up? And so I was just thinking about them embarrassing me, falling asleep. The road trip on the way back, they weren't talking about Barack Obama. They were talking about hanging out with me the night before, ordering pizza, playing video games. And I'm driving on a highway saying, Shawn, you concerned about your son's falling asleep. This is what, 6-year-old boys do, after sitting, they did great. And the power of, I think, perspective as fathers, and giving ourselves permission, Kenny, to have some self compassion. Because unfortunately, for so many of us, it wasn't modeled in households with our dads, this sense of self compassion, right? It's like, I provided for you, right? The other night I was watching Fences, right? And just the dynamic of the father lost dreams, not living up to this sense of his potential, and then telling his son, like you, I don't have to like you, right? I provide for you. But realizing that, God, dad wasn't liking himself. How can I like you? How can I love you if I am not liking and loving myself, right? And so the therapy journey for me has been really key to my daddy journey and my daddy story, because you talked earlier about being in the moment, right? And what that moment means for our children, right? And a sense of self awareness. What does this moment mean for me, Shawn? Why are you like rushing and learning? And I'm still learning this, to take a moment in the gap, right? When someone says something, right? And especially your kids, instead of like the quick response, being meditative and methodical enough between, that's what we have, right? We have the power. Susan L. Taylor always tells me this, right? You have the power to choose. In the gap is the power I have to choose how I'm going to respond
Wow.
as a father,
Yeah.
as a husband. Some days are good, some
Hmm.
moments are good, some
Yeah.
moments are
No,
not
and
so
that's it's interesting because we uh, how does the or why does the shoemaker's kids have hole in their shoes, right? And so it's like, as we do this work to try to strengthen the capacity of men and fathers to be better equipped to be all the things that they desire to be in the lives of their families. It may not always, to your point earlier, it may all not look like they're the dad of the year, right? They're the dad of the moment, and sometimes that has to be enough. Sometimes give me my dad of the moment award. I really don't care about, but give me enough
much.
dad of the moment awards, and I'll be fine, and I'll think we'll all be fine. The other thing I know about you, Shawn, is that, even prior to me meeting you, as I have heard stories about you and kind of watched these videos eke out. Like, I saw one the other day that I had never seen before. And it was you being interviewed by someone. I think it was even prior to Harlem Children's Zone. It might have been at the Beacon Schools. You were being
Yep.
interviewed
Mhm.
about
Yep.
being a leader. And that's what I want to kind of hang on for a moment, because you have always shown yourself to me as a leader. Like, at what point in your life did you embrace this whole notion that leadership would be a integral part of your life?
So I don't think it was a moment. I think it was like gradual of moments as I look. But I do remember one moment in middle school when I remember us coming home. It was after a trip after school, and we are me and three friends coming down the staircase, and there were some older boys that got into the school. And as we were coming down the stairs, they confronted us. It was two of them, right? And they were like, "Yo, give us your money," right? And I don't know what possessed me, but the words came out of my mouth. Uh, Why are you robbing us? We're all black. You need to go on the other side of town and rob some white kids. And I don't know if you ever had these moments where, something's coming out of your mouth and they were like, oh, okay. And they didn't rob us. And I was like, who said that? And so it was like kind of like, that's just one example I was conscious of innately having some leadership skills. And I think on the basketball court, But I will also think, like, in college, one of the things I really loved to do, not only was I a basketball player, I was also a poet. And I was the editor of Expression Magazine at Wesleyan University, and organizing poetry readings in the Marcus Garvey Lounge of the Malcolm X House, and creating a sense of community, cultural expression, a place where I had a platform to recite my really bad poetry, but even more so than that, creating a place where what I really remember, this sister Sonia Cole, and I write about Sonia, who is a psychiatrist now, uh, in my book, where she was a poet but was really shy, right, and never in a public space shared her poetry, and creating this environment of community of Black students on campus, wine and cheese, candles, and Sonia for the first time reciting her poetry to the community, and the feedback and the love she got and the smile. I was like, wow, I love that. And so most of my life has been really about how do I, as a leader, create platforms to help others shine their light, right? So there's been moments along those a journey, right? And we could talk a little bit more about resiliency, right? Falling and getting up, and like, okay, that's a quality of leadership that I've been able to over the years. One of my mission mantras is it's not how far you fall, it's how high you bounce, right? And so I've had some experiences as a leader like that as well.
And you've been around, several, very inspirational and prominent leaders. I remember a time where, I always talk about coming down from Albany, New York, to New York for meetings. And so where people in New York never even knew I lived in Albany. They knew I was from Brooklyn and they knew I had family, but didn't know. Like I would come down to New York for a meeting like I was going across the street. Like if there was a meeting in New York, I'd be on the highway. Until my wife said to me one time, you know how much it costs for you to like drive from Albany to New York and back? And then she calculated it all up. And she goes, and how much they pay you? And I'm like,
You go on the highway, and you were in your lane,
but there was a couple of meetings, I believe, and they didn't happen. I think they were quarterly meetings that Jeff Canada would host at the Harlem Children's Zone, and he was bringing a few of us brothers in there,
Yeah.
and allowing us to lean on his wisdom. And he would I would just remember being in. I can't recall anything specific that he inspired me on, but I do remember him being inspiring. What do
Yes.
you account for your role in your leadership position and your forward moving that you have gleaned from the leadership of Jeffrey Canada?
Wow. So Jeff has been such a transformational leader, figure, big brother, loving friend in my life. And I remember connecting with Jeff at a time when I had just come out of drug rehab. Right, I was
Mm.
in an organization called the Dome Project that was affiliated with Reedland Centers for Children and Families, which eventually became the Harlem Children's Zone. And it was Jeff, along with two other leaders, right, that I, you know, or in my corner, I call them like the Bundini Brown, Angelo Dundee, and Dr. Freddie Pacheco, was Jeff, Alfonso Wyatt, and the late Richard Murphy. But Jeff had this sense of boldness, right? And sometimes, having someone to believe in you before you can believe in yourself. Jeff told me, like, I believe in you, right? You got some qualities, right? And I remember there was a period where he couldn't make all the speaking engagements that he was asked to do, and he would say, I'm going to send Shawn Dove instead of sending myself. And by him doing that, I was like, oh, wow, I must have some qualities. And then watching him build Harlem Children's Zone, right, and build team. Something he said to me, he was like, Shawn, you have to have faith before you need it, right? And having faith in God, having faith in yourself, and trust. He trusted me, right? And I messed up. I don't know if we can curse on your. I effed up a lot as a leader, but giving me that space to f up, dust myself off, right? And we all, and sometimes it doesn't matter like how old we are, right? Just like you can have daddy hunger at 5 and you can have it at 55, right? As men, I think we're wired and have this craving for someone to say, I believe in you. You have value. You make a difference, right? And in so many ways, right, being like down with Jeff and being on Jeff's team at the Harlem Children's Zone, him trusting me and Joe Stewart to go and launch the Beacon School in Harlem. I look back 30 years ago, realizing that all had something to do like with my leadership journey. And sometimes it was like, your associations. My mom used to say, I don't have to ask you what you're doing. I just need to look at who you hanging out with on the corner when I come home from school, right? And like being on Jeff's team, I was a better ball player, right? I was a better leader. So that power of association, right? But that fearlessness, boldness, and getting ish done, right? Stuff done, for me, just like has had a profound impact. And he just like recently celebrated 40 years leading and being at the Harlem Children's Zone, and I was at that celebration. And time travels fast.
Yeah, it travels really fast. It's crazy because the moment that I remember about him, because I knew him before that, he just didn't remember me. I wasn't in his space, let's say that. But we used to bring him up to Albany, New York to speak. He had a relationship with a good friend of mine who ran the NAACP in Albany, Ann Pope. And Ann Pope used to bring him up to New York to speak at our dinners and things. And when he wrote the book, Fist and Stick, I think that was the name of the book.
Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun.
Yeah. When he wrote that book, she brought him up to Albany to do a book signing of that book. And I have a picture of him. And the reason that the picture is so significant to me, Shawn, is because outside of the people who worked at the library and myself and Jeffrey were the only people there. And it always reminds me when I used to look at that picture and knew where he had gotten to and what he had did, is that we all come from somewhere.
Yep.
Right? That we all had to start somewhere. We didn't start out the box, speaking to 50,000 people. Like, we didn't start out the box educating people we started from somewhere. And it paced me a little bit. It paced me in the sense that, because I have my own picture. Tracy took the same picture of me in Albany, New York, when I wrote When the Tear Won't Fall. And I was in the late library. It was me, Tracy, KJ was a couple of months old, and two white ladies, right, in the auditorium. And I often go back to that picture and say to myself, I began somewhere. Like, I had to think about that. And the reason that I bring that up is because that relationship stimulated you into probably one of the most boldest things I've ever seen someone do as it relates, particularly to Black men, is your transition to the Soros Foundation, and the creation of the corporation, or the
Campaign for Black Male Achievement.
Campaign for Black Male. Corporation is in my head. Campaign for Black,
That's
because that's the
evolution.
ending. Right, that's the ending in my head. So I kind of forget the beginning part. But where you evolved into was really what you thought we should be creating, that there needed to be an institution, right, that housed this work. Talk to me a little bit about that journey from the campaign to the corporation.
Sure. Wow. Well, one, I would like for your. It was Jeff Canada who actually I had a few people in the early winter of 2008 send me this job announcement for Open Society Institute. They were launching an initiative for Black men and boys, and I was like, oh yeah, that's nice, but I'm not going to apply. At the time, I was working at my church, First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens, and serving as the director of youth ministries and publishing Proud Papa. And but then I got a call, I remember vividly, from Jeff, who said, look, Open Society Institute, he started the call with like, look, I don't know where you are in your career. If you want to be, you're trying to be a publisher, you're trying to be a preacher, what you're trying to do, but here's an opportunity that I think you should consider, throwing your hat in the ring, right? And, when your mentor, right, makes a recommendation, maybe I need to take a look at this, right? And up until that point, I had never gone through an interview process. It was like 5 interviews, and it was a 3-year campaign. And at the time, right, at Open Society Institute, I think of a brother, Alvin Starks, who was on staff there. And there were folks like Lauren Harris, who was at the Ford Foundation, and ABFI, the Association for Black Foundation executives. And I bring all of those folks up because nothing happens in a vacuum, right? There are always players. We just don't arrive here and say, I'm here. People are opening doors, making recommendations, saying your name in rooms that you are not even in, that allow you to get into spaces. And I remember joining Open Society Institute. I remember them saying that, put down your direct service hat. This is about policy advocacy. And I wasn't smart enough, Kenny, to say, okay, yes. And I was like, no, it's about building community. And how do you bring into rooms and spaces not only philanthropy, but practitioners, academia, policy advocates, arts and culture. And what was supposed to be a 3-year campaign, and that's the crazy thing about philanthropy. How are you going to take a generational issue of Black people and Black men and boys being oppressed and white supremacy, structural racism, and say in 3 years we're going to, change things. But working for a living donor like George Soros helped to take off this 3-year term limit. And for me, it was bringing all of my previous skills to this position. One was like, admitting that, you know what, Shawn, this is new to you. You have not gone this way before. Asking for help, right? Being humble to ask for help. Then also seeing beyond the campaign, and we're thinking like, you know what? We need more than a campaign. We need something like a corporation for Black male achievement, right? And an endowed philanthropic entity that will lean into this issue. Because at the time, I thought $5 million a year was a lot of money, and realized when we're talking about the enormity of what we're uh, I remember, this is another story. This is when Richard Murphy was alive, and I had this vision of the Corporation for Black Male Achievement. Right, we need to really endow this work with some significant resources. I remember having breakfast with him and saying, I have this vision of creating this plan to get $250 million from Open Society Institute and George Soros to create a corporation for Black male achievement. And I thought I was being big and bad and bold, right? $250 million. And he looked across the table and he said, $250 million? That's not enough. You need to get $1 billion. You need to ask for $1 billion. And I was like, stop playing, right? I thought I was like, 250. I'm asking for 250 million. You said, no, you need $1 billion. You're not thinking big enough. And then he said, let me hear you say it. And I was like, stop playing. He was like, no, let me hear you say $1 billion for Black men and boys, right? And I was like, I thought it was funny. He's like, we're not leaving until you say $1 billion for Black men and boys, right? And I was like Moses stuttering, right? I couldn't even like get the words out of my mouth, right? And so the importance of having folks around you, right? And I will say that, so the Corporation for Black Male Achievement has not evolved into this $1 billion social enterprise. God had a different plan, right? So we sense that the not-for-profit at the end of 2020, and so much, Kenny, of what I have been called to do has been around writing, publishing, and speaking. And I said, you know what? I'm going to transform or reinvent the campaign into an LLC, the Corporation for Black Male Achievement, which is a consultant and publishing firm that creates communities that tell stories of loving, learning, and leading for and by Black men and boys, right? And that's the work, along with the work that I'm doing now, still in philanthropy, that in this third act, right? I'm in this third act, and what are you going to lean into in this third act, Shawn, right? And it's the writing, the publishing, the speaking, and creating spaces for others to tell their stories, and particularly young Black men, 18 to 25 years old, right? So many of whom that I am coming in contact with that are, trying to find their way, right? Trying to find their voice, looking for relationships that help them heal, right? And so a lot of this is just replicating what people have done for me and how they have poured into me. And I will say that, Black men and boys, we don't need saviors, right? We just need believers, right? People that believe in our assets, believe in our beauty, believe in our humanity. And if someone would have told me, Kenny, 35 years ago that Shawn, You would be related to black male achievement. If someone Googled you, your name would come up related to black male achievement. I would have said, shut up and pass the joint. And what the hell is Google anyway? And so we don't know what is in store for us, right? Part of my journey and my story, and I say it a little flippantly about pass the joint, right? A transformational moment for me at the end of my a run with
Mm,
drinking and drugging was like I was ready to jump on the tracks and end it all. I was ready to jump on the tracks and grab the third rail because I did not believe there is another way to escape this prison I had
right.
created for myself. And God had another plan, right? And instead of jumping on them tracks, I went into a therapeutic community. And I think about all that He has used me for in the last 35 years. If I would have jumped, I think of Nehemiah, Cameron, and Caleb, right? I think of my wife Desiree, right? I think of our relationship. I think of all that I've been able to do in the field of black male achievement would never
Mm,
have happened, right? And I say that because um, suicide, um, especially with black men and black boys, those numbers are increasing, and so many of us are suffering in silence and need to hear,
mm,
"Wow, Shawn Dove, you experienced that too, right?" And so we need to vulnerably tell
yeah.
those stories. I believe uh, no, yes, we don't post like we post all the victory
Mm, right.
images, right?
Right.
And we don't post the like curled up in a fetal position, crying and depressed and all of that. And we got to tell those stories of that the
Right.
moment, our darkest
Yeah.
moments, not deciding to end it all,
Hmm.
right? And so that's part of my story, a significant part where I chose life instead of death. I forgot what the question was, but that was just an exquisite ramble that
Right on target, right on point. But as we kind of close, I just want to touch on this. You said a couple of things, and one is I gotta come back and feedback around with you because maybe I didn't know what I was gonna do with this thing, been inspired to do it, and actually been working on it. I need to get and really focus on it. So I'm writing my memoir. And so my memoir is a is an overture of the last 20 years of my life when I started Fathers Incorporated. I've never when the tear won't fall, it was all pre Fathers
mhm,
Incorporated. I've never told the 20 years of my life within Fathers Incorporated. And so I'm writing my memoir now about that. And it's crazy because I thought I was going to start from 20 years ago, which is I did kind of start from there, but I've since begun to start from here and back into it and then fill in the blanks as I go back so I can make a reference point to things that have happened 10 years ago to things that have happened now as opposed to the other way around. It's almost like telling the story backwards. I've been kind of
mhm,
thinking
mhm.
about doing it that way. Start from now and then go all the way back. And so, and it is this kind of memoir storytelling that talks less about the factual aspects of my life, but more to the environment and my feelings and my emotions and my struggles and my triumphs and and my frame of thought, right? How did I think about things when I was thinking about things? And what does
Yes,
that look like?
yes.
I think that's the best way to tell the story for someone else to glean things that would help them move forward without knowing the facts of my life.
That is pop. That's a literary. So one, you already so you've done it already, right?
Mhm.
uh, when the last tear won't fall, right?
Mhm.
But telling this story, right? That's our strength, right? Our stories. And there is someone waiting to hear and read your stories, right? You know, one of my mantras is that someone that you don't even know is
Mhm.
rising up in their leadership calling only because they're watching you rise up in yours.
Mhm.
And Man Child in the Promised Land, as a 15-year-old sitting in a circle at the Dome Project, and my coach John Simon said, "Y'all not getting up into the court until we read this, chapters of this book," had a profound effect on me
Mhm.
and my teammates, right? And so reading Claude Brown's story and reading in the book about Sonny and that coming of age story planted seeds in me of just writing, publishing, telling my story. And
Mhm.
so I'm thrilled to hit because you have like phenomenal, like just the other day, I can't remember where we were. I think you were with Patrick Oliver on his uh,
Mhm.
podcast, and you were telling the story of um, what you went through to be awarded the Fatherhood
Mhm.
Clearinghouse contract, right?
Mhm.
I was like,
Mhm.
God, I've known Kenny for almost 20 years, but I hadn't heard the details of
Mhm.
that story. I was like, I
Mhm.
needed to hear that. I needed to
Mhm.
hear that resiliency story and
Mhm.
how timing and being in the right place and people looking out and you like saying, you know what? I may not think that I have what it takes to do this, but other folks do. I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
And what we need to hear those stories. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you are going to tell it. And thank you for all that you've done and continue to do around this fatherhood, right? Not just black dads, but all dads, right? You said something recently or wrote something recently about, um, we hear a lot about absentee dads.
Mhm.
We don't hear enough about the dads that are present, the
Right.
dads that are struggling to be present, dads that are formerly incarcerated that are stepping up and saying, I am present in my children's life and I need support. Like, that's the thing, and that's what Proud Papa was about, right? It wasn't about
Right.
black men as pimps, players, perpetrators. It was about us as proud papas, right? About our
Mhm.
purpose and about our power, about our presence as fathers, right? And we need that platform. There's so much out there that's promoting a different story about black men, about black fathers, right? And
Right.
so you have been
Yeah.
prolific, brother. You have been prolific.
Mhm. Yeah, I wanna, I wrote this thing and I don't even know when I'm gonna share it with the public. I shared it amongst a few of my friends and I wrote this. It was God put it in my spirit and I wrote it. It took me like 10 minutes to write. And it's called Enough. And so over this 2024, you'll hear me begin to start talking a little bit more about this conversation around enough and what that means for individuals like you and I and many of the men and women in our circle that deal with this whole notion of enough, and it's the thing that kind of drives us to work for our people. I never forget. I don't even know why I just recalled this some years ago. Actually, when we were doing the stuff around Moynihan Revisited, I came to New York City to an event that Cornell West was at.
Mm,
Didn't know that brother. Didn't know he would even want me to interview him. It was like, I'm going there and I'm gonna have I brought Ali with me. I said, bring the camera. I don't know if you're gonna let me interview him at the end, but we're gonna take a shot. I'm gonna go down. And we went down. It was a small thing on the Upper West Side, and it was probably about 50 people in there. And we stood around till the crowd died out. And then I finally went up to him and introduced myself to him, and I told him what we were doing, and he just went in when mentioned what we were doing about the Moynihan report, and
Mm.
he just started. Like, I didn't even have to ask him a question.
Yes, yes, yes.
He gave me everything that I wanted, and he sat down. And when he sat down, it was like I had to just sit there and listen. But one of the things he said to me, Sean, was one of the things that has stuck with me throughout my career and throughout my space, that has kind of given me this adrenaline to keep moving forward, regardless of what I believe to be the progress or the change. He said to me that it takes a particular kind of person to work for people that don't love themselves,
Mm, mm, mm,
to get up every morning and to do that, because it's a thankless job. But you still have to do it because it's your people.
mm,
Like, you still have to grind because somebody's grandmother prayed for them. That's what he
mm,
said.
mm,
Like, and you got to continue to do that regardless of how you see your production producing any level, of outcome or outputs in what you're doing. And so I carry that every day. It's like, even when you watch the chaos and dysfunction of what we see in social media, which we'll come back in another show and talk about how we are depicted in the media and what that looks like, which is something we have to pay more attention to. But the thing that drives me crazy is not so much what happens in social media, but who stimulates the conversation. Because on my pages in media and what that looks like, which is something we have to pay more attention to. But the thing that drives me crazy is not so much what happens in social media, but who stimulates the conversation. Because on my pages, there's not a lot of people who don't look like me. And so
mhm.
whatever it is I'm seeing is being created and stimulated by people who look like me. And that's something that we have to address. We have to really kind of start talking about the narrative that we're creating out there and what we're putting in full sight of our children with respect to how their parents
Yeah,
articulate particular things that are happening in society, and how we expect, to your point earlier about your kids, how we expect them to then grow up, evolve, mature in the backdrop of watching their elders not growing up, not evolving, and not acting in a mature manner. And so, how is that supposed to happen? So that's a whole nother conversation. I'm gonna put you out on a wide out, because this is where I want you to close. Because every time I go wide out, I see
all
it.
right. But before you go wide out, you were talking about moments, right?
Mm,
And don't wait too long. And I'm hoping even now could be the moment that you begin to share publicly enough,
mm,
because someone, and if I had it in front of me, don't let me have to call it up and update. Someone watching this right now needs to hear what you wrote in enough, right? And so you may
mm.
have some strategic unveiling of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I would encourage you to start sharing it now, right? And
Mm.
I
Well,
mean,
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. And then I want you to share something. Since we're sharing, we're gonna share it.
okay,
We're gonna share it separately. But I want you to share yours first. And so, because it's something that I'm gonna wide you out because it's in the
okay.
background. So behind your right shoulder is a is a photo that I have in my home and in my office. And it's there because you have inspired that imagery to me, as we have both kind of really leaned in on the principles of Muhammad Ali. And it is the iconic photo of Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston. And you narrate the meaning of that picture to you in a way I've never heard that picture narrated. Could you share that with our listeners?
Sure. I thought you were talking about the picture of my wife Desiree.
Well, that too. You could.
Yes, yes. Muhammad Ali was my first hero. Um, I remember as a young boy, my mother giving me a postcard with Ali in his white shorts, and as a little boy and as a young man, and with his arms up. And I remember, like, I wanted to be like that, and just seeing him on TV, and then learning more about a black man saying, I'm fast, I'm pretty, and I can't possibly be beat. And hearing his poetry, he's like the first one to seed uh, poetry inside of me. And so he was like my first hero, and wanting to be like Muhammad Ali when I grew up. And as you know, creating Rumble Young Man Rumble as part of the Black Male Achievement Movement, right? And what's interesting about this picture, which is perhaps the most iconic picture of Ali in the second Sonny Liston fight, first round, first minute, and knocking Sonny Liston out, right? I often share that, my goal is to have most days like being like being like Muhammad Ali in that picture. But I've had some days when I felt like Sonny Liston. But, and I got to put this picture up, to me, that is not even the most iconic picture of Muhammad Ali. The most iconic picture for me is a picture of him going down on the canvas after a left hook by Joe Frazier. 3 years after Ali coming back into the ring after the U.S. government stripped his ability to earn a living because he refused to enlist in the Vietnam War. 15th round of the fight of the century. And Ali had every reason to stay down after that left hook. But he got up, right? And he wasn't just getting up for himself. He was getting up for all that believed in him. He was getting up for his ancestors. He was getting up for, at the time, 9-year-old Shawn Dove that would have to model the same thing, getting up after getting knocked down, right? And so being able to create a movement at the Muhammad Ali Center. And I just want to share with you, we were there last November, and I had an opportunity to meet for the first time Lonnie Ali. And she said, thank you for using my husband's legacy and the Muhammad Ali Center on behalf of our Black men and boys. It's like a really powerful thing, right? And so poetry. I'm going to share a poem before you, and then pass it on. And you're gonna share enough.
Yep. I'm gonna share it.
And this is a poem, Kenny, that I wrote back in 1988 when I conceived and was leading a program called Poetry in Motion Off-Court Creations, which is a combination basketball clinic and writing workshop for young men that used basketball diaries and articles to promote literacy. And this was even before I surrendered, right? Even at this time, right? This was a season when I was like going to jump on the tracks. But this goes and speaks to us telling our stories, right? And I wrote this in 1988. Whilst that poetry in motion, I stopped to look for a brother with ways to write a book. Arrange round me with a story to tell, a billion brothers who know all too well about unwritten words that unwillingly die before bred and bound and able to fly. Why do my brother's words wear weights of woe? My ears to the ground, I'm dying to know. We must give our words wings so they can sing a song for all brothers they will bring. The ability to dream, to fly, and to soar. It's to you, my brothers, these words are for. To give your words a life, you must sit and write your story with tales of what life is like. Do me a favor and set your words free, because I need to hear them. Do it for me.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard. Every time I hear that one, and there's another one that you do as well, that you do also, and that was incredible. I think one of the things I wanted to do, Sean, with this one is I actually want to commit it to memory, and so I really want to be able to just off the top of my head, just do it. And I have a couple of speaking engagements this year. I will know it by memory before I step out there on the stage, but the poem is called Enough, and you can glean from it what you can glean from it. And so, why I can't think enough, read enough, serve enough, want enough, love enough, dislike enough, know enough, do enough, be enough, smile enough, cry enough, care enough. Explains why I can't sleep enough, why I worry if I can't change enough, why my age and my body keep telling me I'm not enough, why my bank account deceives me to think I don't have enough, why I worry about my children if I've done enough. Why am I afraid? Because I know one day God will quietly say, job well done, but enough.
Mm, mm.
Um, and so
Thank
it was
you.
the
Thank you.
space I've been in. And you put something on top of it, which is going to make this thing go, which is what's your punctuation behind enough? Is it a question mark? Is it a period? Is it a comma? Is it a semicolon? Is it a dash? What is it that explains your enough, and how does it play a role in your life? That's something that I want to begin to start doing this year, to build on for people, because it is one of those things that I think we all struggle with. Enough.
Mm.
Um, and so who knows? That might be a whole nother book that
It
I
is.
write
Wow.
explaining what that looks like depending on what the punctuation behind it is. So
And thank you for that, brother. And thank you for reading that and sharing. And maybe even in this moment, we can amplify a movement where uh, brothers like you and I say to each other, I love you.
mhm.
You are enough.
Yeah. Well, and then I'll end here, and that is, what do we call this thing, Sean? You typed it the other day. Don't say it. I'm going to tell it, because when you said it, it resonated so loud in my, like you said, my baby jumped when I saw you said it. And I'm trying to find the text messaging that you and I and Bish Ferg were sharing, and you said, "Oh, here it goes." Um, what did you call it? um, we got to get to the Three Servants Inc. We got to get to the Three Servants Inc. That
So,
maybe is our that may be the thing where we just come out and just triangle that thing up, because I know. So one of the conversations Bishop Ferguson and I have been having, like, he is ready to and wants to revive Starve the Beast.
mm, mm,
So when you talk about the seeds that we've been given and the time that we're in and this relevant conversation to have, when he said that to me, I was like, whoa, yeah. That was before his time.
woo,
That was
woo.
before his time.
It's so God, the highway metaphor. We're driving down the highway on our life's journeys, and we pass roadkill.
Mm,
Roadkill that are dreams that we have let die.
hmm
Roadkill that we've let others kill. Roadkill that are dreams that were before its time. Certain roadkill, we just have to keep on driving.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain roadkill like starve the beast.
Mm-hmm.
We got to pull over and give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to and
Mm-hmm.
breathe it back into life, right? And
Right.
so that's an example. God done told me, you ain't getting no more, don't ask for no more new ideas. I've given you enough. Go resuscitate some of that roadkill
Right.
that you let die on the side of the road, right? And so I see me, you, and Darren, Bishop Ferg, and our Three Servants Incorporated, right? And very quickly, people know about the parable of the three servants, but what happened? What would happen if the brother with 5 talents went and got the brother with 2 talents and went and got the scared brother who buried his talent, help him dig up his talent, and together they put all of their talents together, formed Three Servants Incorporated. And when the owner of the vineyard came back from his journey, they were all blessed, right? And how do we form these collaborative Three Servants Incorporated strategies, right? So let's go ahead and do it and start off with a podcast and just kick it.
Absolutely. So, man, brother, thank you so much. Thank you for starting my 2024 off this way. I know this is going to be part of the archival repository of wisdom that people will glean from for years and years, these next 3 weeks. And actually this 4th one that I'm interviewing this brother from the UK that I met online a few weeks ago. He's a pastor, and he did a TikTok that I just kind of ran across him doing, and he was talking about how as a parent, you would never think that you would ever be the parent who was laying in the middle of the street crying in agony because your child was just murdered. And his son was murdered in New England, and they have somebody has a picture of him laying in the middle of the street, just like and you know how that cry when you find that out. And he said, "You never think it's going to be you until it's you." And that's the story he's telling, and his mantra is live and learn. And so I'm doing him. He's coming right after you. So this month is going to be, I believe, very deeply spiritual and intentional and focusing for me with respect to where I want to go for the rest of my time on this rock. And so to all my before I leave, tell people how they can get in touch with you, how they can purchase the book, all those good things.
Sure. If you go to dovesoars.com, www.dovesoars, and the Dove Soars is, I think, in my picture there. You can order the book, iTunes America, on Loving and Leading Black Men and Boys there. Shawn at dovesoars.com is my email. On Twitter /X, whatever it is, Dove Soars, Shawn _Dove, on Instagram, LinkedIn, Shawn Dove, and Facebook, Shawn Dove is how I can be reached. And if you send me a smoke signal, I'll get it also.
Yeah, that always works, right? And to all of my other I Am Dad podcast listeners, thank you so much. Thank you for giving us your time. You could be doing anything else, but you're here with us today, listening to us, and hopefully that there's something in here that you can glean from, that blesses you, that accelerates you, that inspires you. Any of those things. So you know what? All of those things. And until next Sunday, as my good friend Art Mitchell and mentor used to always say to me, it's nice to be important, but you know what? It's much more important to be nice.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad Podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.